Welcome, everybody, to another episode of RPMHD NHRA Race Recap, broadcasting live from, my house and Dave W's house. Good. Talk about the NHRA Super Grip Thunder Valley Nationals in Bristol. What a weekend it was. We had a repeat top fuel final that no one expected. We had a Pro Stock motorcycle winner that everyone expected. And we had a Pro Stock final round that didn't go as expected. All in all, a hot weekend, went normal. Performances were once slow, mid-80s. Next thing you know, we're running low to mid-70s. So here with Dave W today. Dave, how's it going?
Oh, it's going great. Much better weather in Bristol than it sounds like you're having out there. You got a little bit of a heat wave, a little early summer action over there out on the Golden Coast.
Yeah, I'm out here in the Bay Area. It's been in the triple digits in my house, and I can tell I got a tan. I mean, it has not been fun. I am not a fan of hot weather at all. Not my thing.
Yeah, I understand. Well, that's okay. But, as long as it's out of there before we get to Sonoma, we'll be all right.
Oh no, it's gonna be here at Sonoma. The Friday night session. That's why the Friday night session at Sonoma is so great, because the rest of the weekend it's pretty much in the 90s. That's just Sonoma, and we know it. So that's just how it is. We're used to it.
But which is kind of ironic, because that's how the Bristol race played out. The Friday night session seemed to be where you were going to make your run at and where you were going to set the field. And because of it, we had some very, very, very unusual names in some unusual places on the ladder.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that again. Conditions, I believe, Sunday were probably better than the Friday night session based off the ET cars were running. And when you look at where Doug Coletta and your race winner Tony Schumacher qualified, yeah, kind of makes you scratch your head. Like, what was going on? I mean, it was Doug Foley looked like the car to beat there for a moment. I mean, that's how this weekend was going.
That's very true.
I mean, and speaking of top fuel, because we don't even have any highlights, so we're just going to talk about it. How about that? You know, you come off the last race in Epping with Tony Schumacher versus Doug Coletta in the finals. You kind of expected Doug Coletta to be there. You didn't expect Tony Schumacher to be there. He loses in the finals. And then the very next week at the very next race, you get a repeat of that final round where you don't expect either one of them to be there based off how they qualified.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it just wasn't a typical race day based on the ladders, but the players ended up playing out just the same. And it was kind of a surprise for Tony Schumacher in general, but as Alan kept saying on the PA, if he gets out of first round, he's going to the finals. And he got out of first round, and he worked his way through the field.
Yeah, he's kind of having that year like Clay Milligan had last season. Clay Milligan had a year where he couldn't buy a round. But if he did, he went straight to the finals, if not won the race. And it's kind of like Tony Schumacher's taking his spot this year. That's the way he's been racing.
It is. But you know what? That's good to see. It's good to see that they are actually putting down round wins and getting basically, the monkey off their back, because they struggled really, really bad last year. And it is nice to see them having some success again.
No, it really is. And we were talking before the show started, and I'm trying to figure out what this Tony Schumacher car likes. It struggles in the heat, but it's not a car you look that's going to run mid to high 60s during the good conditions. It's just kind of there. I mean, based off its qualifying last week and then getting this week, it's like the track is hot. Mike Neff doesn't really have a great handle on it, but even in the cooler conditions, he doesn't have a handle on it. It's like, did the track come to Tony Schumacher this weekend? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what this car likes.
I think they're still trying to figure it out too, but at this particular race, it liked wind lights, that's for sure. And Tony was driving it for all it was worth, and getting a lucky kiss in between rounds too. It sounded like from his interviews.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I mean, you look at his first round matchup, he had Jasmine Salinas, and 379. Jasmine runs a 380, which is one of the quickest runs of the round, and had nothing to show for it. Thanks for coming.
Right.
He then Sean Langdon, you figure, well, thanks for coming, Tony. No, 381 to a 383. He puts Langdon on the trailer. goes up against Clay Milligan the following round and puts a 79 on the board to Milligan's 82. And then he beats Doug Kalita, smoking the tires, but Doug was worse, a 423 to Doug Kalita's 489, and Tony's holding the trophy. I mean, it's whoever had Tony in that bracket is kicking, is happy right now, but I don't think anyone did, but hey.
Well, diehard Tony Schumacher fans, you pick him every race, you're bound to get one sooner or later. But yeah, and the ironic thing is, I don't know what happened. I don't think that I ever saw an interview with Doug after the final round. I would have been curious to why he had a 246 light. He must have just been distracted at the tree, or if there was a mechanical failure for how quickly that thing went up in smoke. But something definitely happened to that Kalita car in the final. And I mean, that's all she wrote. But Tony Schumacher was making laps all day. And it's surprising when you look through the actual results, the majority of the wins came out of the right lane. There were good runs in both, but it looks like, I want to say, just about all but 2 of the wins came out of the right lane, which is surprising to me because it doesn't seem like it was a one-lane track. And you could run good on either side, but for some reason, the right lane was favored.
Yeah, I mean, both lanes did seem fairly equal. I don't know, was there a better or worse lane? I couldn't really tell. And going back to that Kalita light and watching it on TV, I actually, because when they showed it from the bird's eye view, I thought Schumacher had red lit at first
because he left so soon. Yeah,
he left so far ahead of Doug, and I'm like, oh man, Tony red lit. I didn't realize Doug was just that late, and that's uncharacteristic of Doug Kalita. So you naturally think, oh, Tony must have red lit and took a shot at the tree, but no. It's not what happened.
I mean, I thought the same thing too. I was like, man, he threw it away 2 weeks in a row, but he didn't.
Yeah, no, he didn't. He didn't at all. And credit to Mike Neff, credit to Tony for his great driving. I mean, they pretty much outran everyone yesterday. I mean, they did outrun everyone yesterday. I don't think he had a single whole shot win. I mean, yeah, it was ugly in the finals, but he still outran him. I mean, They beat the cars that were put in front of him, and the cars in front of him were no sneezes. I mean, it was Jasmine Salinas, who's still learning, but granted, that's a threat. She was ran within 100th of him. Sean Langdon and Doug Kalita and Clay Milligan, I mean, they don't get any tougher than that. I mean,
no. And aside from being tied with Sean Langdon at 061 lights, he had a better light and a better ET than every opponent that he raced.
They used to call him the Machine. Is he still the Machine? I mean,
well, Richmond's going to tell the story, but I just think that it's awesome to see this year and this particular race in general as we get through the other classes. The winningest driver in Top Fuel, Funny Car, and Pro Stock. We're in the semis at this event, and you've got the winningest of each of those categories already picking up wins this year alone. Tony Schumacher adding to his already, top of the heap win total with number 87.
Yeah, 87. You think he gets to 90 before the year is over?
No, I think that would be outstanding if he could, but I just don't think that it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to pick up 3 more. Is this opening the floodgates and now Tony Schumacher's back? I don't think so. But time will tell, I guess.
Well, with each run, you establish more data. In the last 2 races, they've had more runs than any other team. So Mike Neff's got to be building a database, especially for these hot weather tracks, which he seems to be getting down occasionally, not so much in qualifying. But it doesn't matter what you do in qualifying. It's all about race day. I mean, look at where those 2 guys qualified. I mean, I believe Alan Johnson said his car hadn't ran on 8 cylinders all weekend until the first round.
Yeah, he was making a tongue-in-cheek joke about that because he comes out of nowhere and goes to 72. And, talk about making the run of the weekend. How about Antron Brown next to him going 378, which would have run, dang near most of all the other rounds of competition. And he ends up against Kalita 72, and on the trailer he goes first round.
Yeah, nothing to show for it. Poor Antron Brown gets Doug Kalita round 1 when Kalita's qualified way in the bottom half of the field. You throw a 378 out there, and you have nothing to show for it.
Well, and you follow up your big win in Chicago with back-to-back early exits. So, I mean, that's tough for that team, which, I mean, they had a little bit of momentum built up, and with those back-to-back losses down to 6th in points, which Tony Schumacher's win past him. He's up to 5th in points. They're only 6 apart from each other, but still, that is not a bottom 5 team that you would expect.
Well, I mean, we were talking about points last week. I mean, without looking at the points, raise your hand if you think Tony Schumacher's fifth in points right now. Because even with the win last week, I didn't think he'd be fifth. I mean,
Exactly.
that car hadn't done nothing all year. I mean, once again, it's a great team, great crew chief, whatever the case may be. I mean, but I think they'll tell you they hadn't accomplished much. The points would show it. But as of right now, I mean, I was shocked when I looked and see he's fifth. I said, wow, man. It just shows you how tight Top Fuel racing is. And it don't take much to fall and it don't take much to climb. And Antron definitely has fallen these last two races. Last week, I believe he smoked the tires in the first round, and that happens. He just had a bad draw this week. Right. I mean, that's just a bad draw.
Same thing like with former points leader Justin Ashley having a bad draw. Who would expect that you'd have Brittany Force first round qualifying as high as you did? But, man, did that team struggle. And then they come out of nowhere and lay out a 373, which almost was still not good enough. Thanks to Justin's epic light, which he always has when it comes to race day.
Yeah, that Brittany Force team, I've had to believe that even if you're Justin Ashley, when you looked at that round one matchup, you go, I got this. Because she's not going to leave on him. Unfortunate but true. We're just stating the facts here. I mean, you look at her average light versus average light. I mean, she would have basically had to close her eyes and guess to try to leave with him. And you figure it hasn't even really, her car used to be a go or blow car. It hasn't even gone lately. It's just blow. No. So, I mean, the odds are, let's just put something decent down there. She'll cut her usual 80 light. She'll probably smoke the tires between 330 and 600 feet, and we'll cruise on and get the win. That didn't happen. I mean, she had a light. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the best either. He left on her, but the car performed. It went a 73. Credit to Grubby. I mean, maybe this is a sign of things to come.
But she had enough of a light, because if she would have had an 80 light in first round, she would have been on the trailer via a whole shot. She needed every bit of that 69 that she had to stay out in front. But yes, unfortunately, like you say, the law of averages kind of catches up, and at round 2, 095 light against Billy Torrance. And then she repeated with an 069 in the semis, which was just marginally enough to leave on Doug Coletta. But unfortunately, like you said, or they get 300 foot, 400 foot down the track and puff the tires, and that's pretty much the end of their day.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Moving on to, I don't know if there's anything we need to touch on Top Fuel. I mean, Doug Foley looked real strong in qualifying. Looked like he had a car that can go rounds. I don't know if it went a round. Might have went a first round.
He certainly did.
He did go around.
Yeah, he did. He got around the surprisingly struggling still Tony Stewart in the first round eliminations.
Yeah, and that's another thing. That team. Well, first credit for Doug for showing up, looking great in qualifying. Throughout the weather conditions, he pretty much kept pace with everyone that was there. Doug Cook and those guys did a standing job of the weekend. I believe I read that it was a bad spark plug that bit them in their second round loss. It's drag racing, it happens. Moving on to Tony Stewart. I don't even know what to say. I know they're dealing with additional weight and thicker tubing this season, but it is obviously throwing crew chief Neil Strasbaugh a serious curveball. I mean, a hanging curveball that's just, I mean, he can't get anything right now. I mean, they usually make one good run in qualifying, and it kind of just motors down the track real slow when they do get a second good run down, and eliminations has just not been good for that team. And it's a shock considering how the team ran with Leah driving last year. I don't think Tony is the problem. I just think they're just dealing with racing. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, it's shocking. I seriously would have thought that it would be Tony Stewart that would be fifth in points right now and not Tony Schumacher.
I agree. And I think that there was a lot of people who, when we were talking about this stuff in the preseason, were saying, when it comes time to, all right, how many races is it going to take for Tony to win in a Top Fuel car? The over and under was definitely, more people were in the under 8 than it would be over 8. So most people thought that by the time we got to the 4 wides, he would have been holding a Wally by now. And that just hasn't happened.
No, it hasn't. And it's a shock. But hopefully they can turn that turn that team around within the next few races. Maybe they're just testing stuff from the countdown and they just haven't shown their hand yet. I don't know. Moving on to funny car. No surprise, Austin Prock. I mean, that car pretty much lived in the threes all weekend. And they were, when you say they had the team to beat, between him and his teammate, they were the cars to beat.
They were. And it's been a while since you could say that both of the JFR cars are the ones that going into race day are the two favorites. But those cars, I don't know how similar the tune-ups are between the two of them, but they are making nearly identical runs right down the center of the groove. John is driving his car flawlessly. Austin's driving his car flawlessly, and they are getting them down the track. So, whatever they figured out and whatever they've been working on, right now they are the class of the field. They are number 1 and 2 in points. Obviously, Austin is on the strength of his more wins and more rounds. He's 64 ahead of John, but 109 ahead of J.R. Todd, 117 ahead of Matt Hagan, 193 ahead of Tasca, and 282 ahead of Daniel Wilkerson in 6th. So, those guys have really separated themselves. It's really been a case of the haves and have-nots in funny car, even though Daniel Wilkerson has been progressing and going to grounds and going to semifinals and being around late in the day. Hagan's on the strength of back-to-back wins. The JFR cars have come to life this year, and it has been an amazing show to see it happen. Yeah,
it really has. It looks like 96 almost all over again. Not quite like that, but close enough to where John first brought Tony Petrogon onto the team, and the two just pretty much assassinated the rest of the funny car field. Austin Prock, yes. Round 1, he goes 392 and beats John Smith. Second round, he goes 397 to Crew Petrogon's 406. Nice to see Cruz go around the two there. And then 398 beats Matt Hagan's 409. Matt just didn't really seem to have the mustard this past weekend. We'll talk about that shortly. Then the finals, he's 398 to J.R. Todd's 402. Credit to J.R. Todd. He ran 402. He made him earn it. But
402 and cut a good light. He was there.
Yeah. I think Todd Smith and John Overhoff pretty much did the best they could given the circumstances at that moment. And Todd cut a good light, and it just came up a bit short. But even talking about J.R. Todd, quietly in the points running. You're used to seeing the Hagan and Prock and Tasca and Caps. Well, J.R. Todd's right there right now. He's pretty much has filled that void, and he doesn't throw up big numbers. I don't know if he really ever has, even though he's won a championship. But when you look up in the semifinals, he's right there. He's just there. He's that guy that's kind of like, where'd he come from? And
right.
And the way they race, it's almost more like they're not going to give it to you. They're just going to make you earn it. They might say, we can't run what you can, but we can run within 300s. And if you can beat that, go right ahead. And it's pretty smart racing from those guys. And it's why they're showing such good consistency that they are.
No, I completely agree. And like you say, quietly, he's been right up at the top all throughout the season, and nobody's really got him on their radar. And if you watch the points, they're just consistently going rounds, which again, this is another team that when you compare this year to last year, after they had that trouble when John got into him at Pomona, and then they had that other explosion in the first round, and they just couldn't find their way. But all the Coletta cars, the two dragsters and the funny car, are just really sneaking up on it this year, and they're going rounds, and they're up there in the points, and that team on both sides of the fence is resurging pretty well.
Yeah, they really are, and I believe that they're gonna be a true factor once this countdown starts, and they're gonna hurt some feelings, and you never know. They've done it before. They've done it with Worsham. They've done it with J.R. Todd. Don't count them out just yet. Even though JFR has been kind of running shotgun on the field, I wouldn't count out that team just yet. Another team, though, that I want to talk about struggling, Matt Hagan. Outside of his round 1, I believe he went 395 in the first round. That car pretty much lived between a 409 and a 415 through the whole weekend, qualifying and eliminations. Dickey is usually a guy who can get down any racetrack, especially warm racetracks, and But I don't know if they're testing. I don't know what's going on with that team, but they are not nowhere near as consistent as we're used to seeing them.
No, it's hard to say. And like I say, when you're coming off of what you had happen a couple of races ago, back-to-back wins not that long ago, and now all of a sudden we're coming into the hot weather. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how Richmond plays out, and then going into Norwalk. Norwalk is always a wild card with what the weather can do there. It'll be interesting to see if it's more of just a anomaly because of the Bristol track conditions. A lot of guys were having trouble navigating the bump. They said Sunday was better because the conditions were better. The track was tighter, and you can just kind of slide your way over it and not really feel it that much. But the Hagen car is usually one that you figure is going to be like top 3 at the end of the session, one of the top 3 runs, and they weren't there.
Yeah, I really don't know what's going on at that team, but like you said, it's the middle of the season. They might be working on some things, getting ready more so for the end of the season. They might be taking it. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. We'll have to see. I mean, John Forrest, steady as always, made it to the semifinals, had a great car that could have possibly won the race, just got beat there, but nothing to hang his head about. Nothing to hang his head about at all. The way that car's been running, as we spoke about a moment ago, wouldn't be surprised to see that car win 2 or 3 more races this year.
Oh, without a doubt. And before the countdown begins.
Yeah. I mean, definitely before the countdown begins. I mean, they got some pretty good tracks coming up. I know we're not in Denver no more, so we can't say Denver, but
nope, not Denver. Denver's off the schedule. No more Western Swing, unfortunately. Just the 2-race jaunt over there to Seattle and Sonoma.
And John, well, he's been racing so long, you can't really say he has a bad track. If you ask me, his worst track was the track at Columbus, and we don't go there anymore. So,
and one of his best is Bristol. I'm sorry, not Bristol. Brainerd. The other B track where he won. Dang near every race there in the 1990s. He's had varying success since, but wouldn't be surprised for him to put another one in the win column there too.
No, it wouldn't be a shock at all. I mean, like I said, with the way those 2 cars are running, it's kind of like they're just kind of trading blows with each other. Side note, Bob Tasca, seems like once the track temperature rises a little bit,
he got lucky first round.
Yeah, he shouldn't have won the first round. Yeah, he shouldn't have won the first round,
and definitely luck ran out in the second.
Yeah, it completely fell on his face in the second round. And some cars you look at and you just know what they are. They are a car that runs in cool weather. When the track temperature is 105 and below, they'll throw a number up there. Track temperature gets 120, sun's on the track temperature. You can almost just make sure your car goes down the track because you know what it's going to do. And I believe Tasca alluded to it the race before in Epping that they got to get better on these hot racetracks. They got to stop smoking the tires. And he said it at Epping, and it happened at Bristol. So I don't know what's going on there.
We'll see what Richmond brings for him.
Yeah. And last I checked, that track isn't necessarily a cool weather track when they run it this time of year. When we used to run it back in September, October, it would have holy numbers, but not this time of year. Moving on to Pro Stock. And I got to say this. Greg Anderson couldn't have got out of Epping fast enough. That's how bad he looked at Epping throughout qualifying and eliminations. Until the final round, he was in love with Bristol. I mean, Greg absolutely had the car and the most consistent car of the weekend until the final round.
I want to know what they found in qualifying on Saturday to go out there in the worst conditions and make the 2 quickest runs of the weekend in Q3 and Q4 better than anybody did on Friday. I would love to know what they did, and they carried that over to race day too.
Is that not vintage Greg Anderson? Does that not bring you back to 2004 all over again? It's like, where did that come from?
Did. I mean, where did that come from? To put those runs together when nobody else, I mean, and you're daylighting the competition at that point, and it's like, wow, where did that come from?
The racetrack was close to 130 degrees, and he went like 970 or something, 60 foot. It was like, wow. Like, that's unbelievable. And if that's a sign of things to come, pro stock world's in trouble. I mean, he was 001 in the finals, and then the car finally let him down just at the wrong time. But let's not take anything away from Jay Coughlin. I mean, he showed up. He was his consistent self. He cut the lights he normally cuts, which is good for him. I mean, they call him the natural, I believe, or something of that nature. So he won the race. You can't really say he surprised anyone. I mean, he qualified well. He was qualified third.
Right.
665 in the first round, beats Jerry Tucker 669. He goes 669 in round two, beats his nephew, Troy Coughlin Jr., went to his 673. 672, which you didn't think would be good enough to beat Erica in the semis. Somehow it was when she shipped the tires right off the line, and she was 0-10 on the tree. Well, I guess Greg knows how she feels. And then he goes to the finals, and it wasn't spectacular. I mean, I didn't expect him to win with a 670, but Greg was 001, and Greg had a 20-second ET after the car pretty much spun the tires at the hit, and that was it. I mean, thanks for coming.
Only bad run of the weekend when you didn't need it. And, yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see Greg doing what he's doing now. Again, like we talked about with Tony Schumacher, like we talked about with John Force, you got the winningest driver in the class, and he's still relevant to this day. I mean, we're watching history happen. And even when he went to number one, it was his 126th number one qualifier, and he's only 12 behind WJ for the most all-time in pro stock. And that's something that I think could be attainable if that car keeps running as good as it is. Maybe not by the end of this year, but within the next couple, he could have the most number one qualifiers in the history of the sport. The history of the class, I should say, not the sport. John Force still has that.
And he probably tuned WJ to about 80 or 90 of those number one qualifying runs.
Right. So if you put them all together as a tuner and a driver, I mean, he would definitely have the most out of anybody in that particular category. But even just as a driver alone, to be closing in the way that he is, same thing with low ETs, top speeds. I mean, nobody's ever going to catch WJ's top speed with 221 top speeds at a meets. There's guys, it's funny. They were talking about how many times Greg and Jag raced each other going into the final round. And there's guys that are out there that haven't even run 108 pro stock races. Well, Warren Johnson has 221 top speeds at a meet. There's a whole lot less that have run even 221 pro stock races. Those are records that are never going to be touched. But it was great to see Greg and Jag battling out again. Like you said, it's like the early 2000s all over again. Doesn't have Summit on the side. He's got Hendrick cars on it, and Jag's got Skag instead of Jags.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of odd to not see Jag in the yellow and black, but makes sense with Skag being so involved in NHRA drag racing at this time. Going back to the Warren Johnson note, I believe it was a quote that was when the 200-mile-an-hour club was eventually filled up, all those guys, if you combined as many 200-mile-an-hour runs as they had, they still wouldn't have had Warren by the time they filled up the club. They still wouldn't have had more than Warren had.
Right, because he had already made so many of them. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think he started in 97, and the club didn't get filled up till 99. And it's like you combine all their runs, they still don't have as many as him. I mean, it shows you how dominant he was in the 1990s. Can you imagine if he could drive like Jag in the 90s? Man, Warren Johnson, I mean, he put a lot of records out of sight. I mean, that's crazy. But getting back to this event, congrats to Jay Coughlin and what he's done and winning the race. I mean, it wasn't far-fetched to have him win. I mean, granted, he can drive and the car runs good. Guys who have just fallen off, and we spoke about this last week, Matt Hartford, gone round one to David Quadra, 670 to a 669. I mean, I don't know what happened to Matt Hartford, but I don't even think Matt Hartford knows what happened to Matt Hartford. But he is struggling mightily right now in pro stock, and I don't think anyone saw that. I believe we were talking about the points last week and how he's just – I mean, it's a good thing that we're just letting people in if they just show up to every race, because I don't know if Matt would get in if that wasn't the case. I mean,
he's down to 12th in points. So
Derek Kramer's no better. He was gone round one. He qualified 13th, 665 at Dallas Glen, 663. He was gone round one. I mean, a lot of the guys who you're used to seeing in at least the top 8 just aren't cutting it this year. I mean, it's really tough right now in pro stock. Great to see Larry Morgan show up this past weekend with a car that he built the motor for. And though he didn't go any rounds, he got beat by Greg in round one. I mean, just showing up in qualifying is just.
Yeah. Well, and he's another one. I mean, he's his first pro stock race was in 1987. He's still out here doing it. It's just, another name from the past. He runs Greg Anderson first round. It was their 38th meeting between the two of them. Now, Greg's won 34 or now 35 out of 35 and 3 in Greg's favor of all the meetings that they've had. But it was great to see Larry in the field, Jag, Greg. I mean, some of these guys, these names that are out there from the past was really cool to see. Definitely good to see Larry out there.
Yeah, it's pretty lopsided. It's great to see Larry out there, but he runs Greg. It's pretty lopsided.
It is.
I believe one of his first ones might have been that Sonoma win in 2000.
The very first time they ever raced was the final round at Sonoma, and Larry won. And then Greg's owned him ever since.
Yeah, it was like the closest race of the year.
Back for that one.
Yeah, it was crazy, but wow. Well, hey, you know what? Larry has nothing to hang his head about. I mean, he's won Indy. He's done a lot of great things in his career. I mean,
and the fact of the matter is just that he's still out here doing it.
Yeah,
he's been out here after all these years and in all these different decades, and he's still qualifying for the field.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I say, he comes out there with a motor that he built and still made the show. Credit to that guy, man.
Well, you mentioned Dallas Glenn. He's still hanging out of the points lead. He's still got.
I think he made it to the semis.
Yeah, I mean,
made it to the semis, right?
He's got a 21-point lead over Greg, a 35-point lead over Erica, and a 130-point lead over Jag. Your top four in points were your four semifinalists here. So that's the case of the cream rising to the top. So don't look now. Jag's on his way up the ladder real quick. He's working his way up there.
So was it the 1, 2, and 3, 4 qualifiers that were in the semis?
I believe that they were also, that could have been the case for the qualified field as well.
Yeah, I believe Jag was third, Erica was second, and Greg was first. Something in that order. So I believe that was the case. I'm almost sure that was the case. It was nothing like Top Fuel, put it like that. Their semifinal looked nothing like Top Fuel's qualifying order in semifinals.
Oh, no, not at all. Top Fuel, you had all the majority of the bottom half guys that made it. But yeah, when you got the pro stock, yes, they were the 1, 2, 3, and 4 qualifiers. Dallas being fourth, Greg number 1, and then Erica and Jag, which it was ironic the way that it played out because it's always going back to Elite versus KB, and it's just going to be interesting to see as the season plays out who's got the upper hand when it comes time to the last 6.
Well, if you're going with strength and numbers, you have to go with Elite just because their cars are running a lot better than the KB cars. You got pretty much with the KB stack, you got Greg and Dallas, and that's about all you can really count on with Derek Kramer and Matt Hartford being a no-show this year. Cammy Caruso, of course, got injured, and Brandon Foster, he's still learning. He's there, but he's not quite there yet. I mean, Eric Latino, I don't know what to say about Eric Latino. He didn't qualify, which was a shock. I mean,
well, and like you mentioned, so Dallas, Greg, and Brandon Foster are the only 3 KB cars in the top 10 in points, which is mostly Elite at this point. But at the same time, Dallas and Greg are 1 and 2. So
correct. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting come countdown. It's going to be actually interesting the rest of this year. So we just have to see how this plays out. Honestly, I don't see much changing from those top 4 or 5 guys through getting to Indy. But stranger things have happened. But I pretty much see those 4 maybe switching spots. Those 4 or 5 guys maybe switching here from second, third to second. But I don't see much else happening. I don't see no one else really showing up and spoiling the party. Not yet.
No, nobody has really showed their hand that they have the ability to step up. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody does.
Well, I can tell you who showed his hand. It's Matt Smith. Yeah, Gage might have won the race, but Matt Smith showed his hand. And Gage needed a whole shot to beat Matt Smith. If you're Matt Smith, you're holding your head high this weekend. At least I would be, because you outran him. and he only qualified fourth, and you had the field covered, Matt. Okay, you were a little late there, but that can be fixed. You now have a bike that can beat Gage Herrera, and no one has been able to say that for the last year and a half.
Yeah. Now you just got to go out there and do it. Do it like you did on Saturday.
He will. We spoke earlier. I don't know if you agree, but I think this is the next coming of Schultz versus Myers. My thoughts. That's just my opinion.
All right, which one's which?
Well, it's hard to say because Schultz won more. Gage is winning more right now, but Schultz was a six-time champ. Matt's a six-time champ. Myers is always kind of fighting from behind, not by much, but he always, you know what? We'll say Gage is Schultz.
All right.
We'll say Gage is Schultz. I mean, he's dominating like Schultz once did between 93 and 94.
He is.
So,
I agree. Yeah.
And of all their battles, even when Myers won the championship, I believe in 95, I believe he won in 91 as well. Myers never really dominated. He won his share of races. He beat Schultz in the point standing before, but not to my recollection, has Myers ever just dominated a season where he was just. I mean, they put a bounty on Schultz one year in '94. Yeah. You know, I mean, I don't think Myers ever had that type of performance.
No, but he ran well enough that he put together his fair share of wins. It's not like he didn't backdoor his way into the championship. He didn't win championships on consistency, let's just say, as some did. I mean, he went out there and they didn't end their careers that far apart in the win column total. Dave Schultz ending with 44 and John Myers with 33. So, 11 more over the course of the career. But Dave won his in the span of 1987 to 2000, whereas John's were from 89 to 97. So he had a little bit of less national events, a little bit of less time in there. They were pretty comparable to each other. He just didn't string them together in a row the way that Dave did to really have the dominant type seasons.
No, you're right. And I believe what they were also good at is whenever Schultz made a mistake via red light or had an early round loss, Myers was there to capitalize.
Yes. But at the flip side, Myers, unfortunately, was there in the finals and gave a lot of them to Schultz with a red light himself.
Or just being late. I believe it was 96 round one where he lost the championship, coming there with a 22-point lead in 96 in the finals. And I believe the bike either stumbled or broke off the line or whatever the case may be. And Schultz then beats David Cook in the next round and wins the championship, at his last championship, which was in 96. The other factor I think between back then is there was no one else on the property that could really run with either of those bikes. I mean, it was kind of like it was those two and the field. I mean, the rest of the guys were pretty much field failures, and you just hope that one of them made a mistake and you got around when you got around them, and usually one capitalized off the other. As of right now, until the Matt Smith era, which I believe is about to begin again, took place, that's kind of how it was with Gage Herrera. There was no one on the property who could run with his bike, and you just had to hope he made a mistake, which I believe he only did twice. He red-lit once, and he had a problem, I believe, in Indy last year, and that was it.
And then the bike stumbled at Reading. I believe it spun the tire down low, and that's why he lost at Reading. And then Reading was his last loss. That was it.
Yeah, there you have it. So with the Smith team and with the teams now, because now, there's Gage, there's Vanson Himes has 2 or 3 bikes out there. I believe Matt Smith Racing has 4, including his own with
Gianna.
Selena's daughter, Evaristo, his wife Angie, and John Hall. John Hall. It's 4 bikes. It's a little bit different than it was probably in the 90s, a lot more teams, but I believe this is a 2-bike race from this point on out. The Gage Herrera streak is about to come to an end, and I'm calling it. That streak is coming to an end. Matt Smith is ready. Yeah, he got caught sleeping a little bit. Okay, Gage, it took a whole shot for Gage to beat him. Gage's first whole shot win of his career. That's how dominant his bike has been. Those days are over. No one can back half with Matt Smith's motorcycle. And now that he's figured out the 60-foot, Gage is in trouble.
Well, I'm going to say this. He's only going to be in trouble, potentially, if they got to go head-to-head. Because there's no guarantee that they're going to meet each other. There's no guarantee that Matt doesn't stumble or get taken out before he even gets a chance to run against Gage. If that is the case, if they're 1-2 at Richmond, they just happen to qualify well enough here, first and fourth, that they were on the same side of the ladder. But you put them on opposite ends, and they're going to have to run through everybody else before they can worry about going head-to-head with each other again.
I don't think that'll be a problem. I mean, Matt Smith in the semis, he went 682.4 to Matt Smith, 682.4 to Gage Herrera, 682.5. Herrera was 024. Matt was 043. I don't care who you race. You can't be 043 on a pro stock motorcycle. Maybe it was a lane change that Matt did right before they started to fire the bikes up. Who knows? Bottom line is he outran Gage Herrera, and he outran him all weekend.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, the head games are going to start quick in Richmond because now, don't forget, we're doing all 3 sessions in one day. So Saturday, they're running 3 times, right?
Oh, yeah.
Friday.
Yeah.
So we're doing 3. Now, they're 1-2 in points, so they're ending Q1 side by side with each other. And then they're coming back in Q2 in the middle of the day for that Mission Foods Challenge with a rematch of the semis. So they're going to be head-to-head. They're going to be seeing a lot of each other on Saturday on Richmond, and that's going to set the stage. So if you're going to get in the guy's head and put it on him, you better strap one on him Q1 to show him what you got coming up for that Mission Foods Challenge and a preview of what you got coming on Sunday.
Well, and Matt did that in Bristol. He just got caught sleeping with that 043 night. I don't think that's going to happen again. Matt Smith wins Richmond. I'm calling it. Matt Smith wins Richmond.
That is completely fine. But I'm just saying, if you are a fan of pro stock motorcycle, Richmond is your race because you're going to see them head-to-head, guaranteed twice on Saturday and maybe on Sunday too. And it could be for a race win.
So, quick question, and maybe you can answer this, maybe you can. I'm sure other people have had this question. You look at Matt Smith's bike, and it runs great. You look at Gage Herrera's bike, and it runs great. You look at Richard Gadsden's bike, and it runs good. And you look at Angie Smith's bike, and it runs good. Why?
Hard to say.
I mean, it's like, and the guys, your crew guys are telling you, oh, you got the same stuff they got. We're running, our bikes are set up identical. Are they? I mean, something's different.
Well, but I mean, you can only set up something to a certain rider's preference too. They could be as identical as you want, but if Angie and Richard want something else under them or like something else, you can give them the same sprockets, gear ratios, all that fun stuff, clutch setups, launch RPMs, but they got a different way of finessing it. They got a different position, the way that they go down the track, different weight in different locations on the motorcycle makes a big difference. I mean, you can have, it's no different than in NASCAR. You can mass manufacture and replicate an identical winning chassis, and you take it out to the track, and it just don't like the same setup that the first one did. I mean, everything is unique and individual, and you try and make them as close as you can, but they're never going to be identical. And maybe we don't give enough credit to the riders, and maybe Matt and Gage just can make up that little bit of difference that others can't.
There's a lot of points. You make a lot of great points, and that very well might be the case. I, for one, do not know. I do not know. I don't think Richard Gadsden's coming onto his bike 10 pounds heavier than Gage, so he might. I don't know. I doubt it.
Right.
Like you say, it could just be, it's just variables. And I don't know. I mean, I've spoken before. I mean, the same variables affected, I guess, Eddie Krawick last year, huh?
Right, because it's not like, well, and let's go, even if you want to look at that, go a little bit further beyond back. Look when in 2022, when Angel was on that bike was consistently quick and fast, and it flew down the track She
You're
just
right.
struggled at the top end with keeping it pointed in the right direction, keeping it in the groove, keeping it off the center line or off the wall, because it was very darty, towards the end. But she was similarly a smaller rider. Whatever it is with that particular bike, whoever was on it, that bike just hauls the mail.
No, it really does. And, credit to, and I can't pronounce her name, Evaristo.
Gianna Evaristo, yes.
Gianna Evaristo. I want to get it correctly. I mean, she did what she had to do. She made it to the final round, and she made a race of it. She absolutely made a race of it. Could have probably had a slightly better light. Well, slightly would be a gross understatement. She was 130 on the tree, but maybe she got up there, got a little nervous, and figured, well, I ain't gonna give it away and go red. I'm just gonna make sure I go green and see what happens. And granted, she got beat. They did put a competitive bike under her, an 86 to an 81, so 500s. Unfortunately, she could have left with a perfect light, and she still would have lost. But still, yet competitive, and great weekend for her. I mean, take nothing away from her. She did real well, making it to the finals, especially with the field, with those other bikes that are there. That's just a huge accomplishment of her own. I mean, she beat Richard Gaston 689 to a 691 the round before. Chase Van Sack gave the race away. He went red, 024 red to her 075. But in drag racing, you got to have at least one lucky round, and she had one there, and she made it to the final round. It was a good showing for her. She seems to be showing progress on that bike. She's been on Suzuki for the last few years, and now adapting to this build, she seems to be getting better, and hopefully this is a sign of things to come. But I'm calling it. It's going to be the Matt Smith. It's going to be the Matt Smith Gage Herrera show from this point on. I got Matt winning Richmond,
and that may very well be the case. But before he gets there, and it's never a foregone conclusion. You never know what's going to happen round one. Anything can happen at any particular point in time. But regardless of anything, as of this moment in time, you are witnessing NHRA as a series, as a sport, history with what Gage Herrera is doing. He already passed Tony Schumacher's most consecutive round win streak at 31. He already passed Don Perdome's in funny car at 30, which are the most in those particular classes. And he already passed Dave Schultz at this last particular event. Dave was at 34. He is now at 35. Now, why is it 35? He's won all these races in a row. Well, obviously, the four wides are only 3 rounds. That's why. Bob Glidden's 35 is because some of those events back in the 78-79 season had 8-car fields. So they also were 3-round events. So he may have won just as many events, but the rounds were off as well. So at this particular point, Gage Herrera is tied with Bob Glidden, and Bob Glidden has got the most consecutive national event victories at 9 between 78 and 79, and most consecutive round wins at 35, making it to the semifinals, getting famously ended at that Mile High Nationals in 1979 against Randy Humphrey. So right now, Gage Herrera is 1 win light away from history in all classes of the professional series of NHRA in its last 70-plus years of existence. Nobody has won more in a row than this man right now.
No, it's truly a remarkable feat, and you can't take anything away from him or that Vance and Hines team. I mean, Vance and Hines has proven over the past 20 years or so, 25 years, that they flat out can get the job done on a pro stock motorcycle, and Gage is the guy who's just in that catbird seat right now until Richmond when Matt Smith shows up. But credit to Gage and that team for what they've done over the past year and a half. I mean, they pretty much have stomped everyone. He qualified 4th, which was his highest, or however you want to look at it, of his career since joining Vance and Hines. I don't know what his number 1 qualifying streak was at. I'm not really sure.
Before Matt Smith took it over?
Yeah.
His number 1 qualifying streak was at 11 national events in a row.
That ain't bad.
And the only one that he didn't get was when Hector Arana Jr. was number 1 at Denver. Otherwise, he would have swept the season all of last year and all the way up to Joliet, Illinois. So basically, there's only been 3 national events in his entire Vance and Hines career that he's not been number one.
It just goes to show you Bob Glidden's number one qualifying streak at 21 races is something that I don't think will ever be touched. I mean, as great as Gage has been, he got to 11. And 11 is nothing to sneeze at. But no. Greg Anderson in his prime, 03, 04, didn't get 21. I mean,
no.
That's some records. They say records are meant to be broken. I don't think that Bob Glidden number one qualifying streak ever gets broken.
Well, and his actually was at 23.
23. Did it end in Gainesville, I believe? And
1988 by Warren Johnson.
Gainesville.
And Gage did have the record. He took away from Matt Hines, who had 10 in a row into Pro Stock Motorcycles in 1999. Gage took that record before Matt stopped him at Joliet. So his is at 11. So he did have that particular class record. The other classes, 9 and 7, when it comes to Top Fuel and Funny Car. But he does have the single season mark of obviously 14, being that the Mile High Nationals last year when Hector Jr. took it was the only one. Otherwise, he would have had a complete season of number one qualifiers that, again, now that Matt Smith has broken that string for this particular season, we'll have to wait another year to give that one a shot. But another record that is not really mentioned, but if he makes it to the final, even if he happens to lose to Matt Smith when he gets there, as you so happen to predict, he will also tie the record of 10 consecutive final rounds in the category, which is also a Dave Schultz record.
Oh, there you have it. The guy's just chopping down those old records, man. Well, I guess some of them are meant to be broken. And I would have to bet.
Now, if we're looking at most consecutive final rounds overall, Bob Glidden had 17 in a row, and Lee Shepard had 16 in a row. Don Perdome had 13, and Tony Schumacher in 2008 had 11. So this is only the Pro Stock Motorcycle record that Dave Schultz and Matt Hines share at 10. So even if Gage doesn't continue his win streak, if he keeps his final round streak active, he can definitely work his way up that list too. But again, the point of the matter is we're taking the record book and stuff that hasn't been touched in decades in certain cases, and we're living it now. So what a time to be a fan of NHRA drag racing.
No, you're absolutely right. And it doesn't really hurt. It's great to see these performances. Some people don't like it. Some people do. Some people look at the domination of Gage Herrera, and it's almost like comes off boring. Especially last year, it was just like some people looked at it as boring. I looked at it as, man, this is crazy what he's doing. The difference between, I think, his domination of last year and maybe a John Force domination of give any year in the 90s, particularly 93, 96, or 99, is Forrest has such charisma that when he wins, and you had Steve Evans who can pull a great interview out of him, it added some sauce to it. And when you watch a guy like Gage wins, who he isn't, I mean, he just kind of says what he says. I mean, he sounds like every other driver. I mean, there's nothing really to it. It becomes boring to some people. And I get that. Whereas when you got a guy like John Force in the 90, he's getting out of the car, it's half on fire, and he's cutting these great interviews, and you never know what's going to come out of his mouth back then. I mean, the interviews are almost as great as the runs, and Force could take a 4 or 5 second run and make it seem like he ran 500 laps at Daytona. You're not going to get that with Gage Herrera, you know. I mean, and unfortunately, he's just going to sound like every other driver. Unfortunately, but true.
I don't even know that he sounds like any other driver. I think you got the flash, the charm, and the charisma out of Force when you stuck a microphone in front of his face. Gage is very quiet, soft-spoken, and humble. You get a lot of humility out of him in the fact that I think sometimes he even finds it hard to believe that he's having the success that he's having, and he just is so appreciative of the ability to do it. It's two different ways of reacting to the success.
Yeah, in a way, just two polar opposites. Forrest gave you a reason to cheer for him because he was just a heck of a guy, and Gage is kind of this guy, like you say, he's soft-spoken, he's humble, and it's like, okay, on to the next. Like, not much to him. I mean, he's just Gage Herrera. I mean, it would be nice to see a guy with that type of dominance, and maybe he's just that humble, and that's just who he is. Show a little more, a little more enthusiasm, a little more. Heck, throw a bottle of Powerade or whoever's supporting the spot. Do something, man. I mean, he just kind of thanks Vance and Hines and for the opportunity he's been given, and see you at the next one. It's hit rewind, press play. Hit rewind, press play.
It reminds me of maybe not so much as like you say, John Force or Greg Anderson. Greg Anderson was very vocal. He was happy, but it was the same thing. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to in his victories. Kind of like a Mike Edwards. When Mike Edwards had his domination in the 2009, 10, 11 era of pro stock, he was the same thing. He got out and he was thankful to win. He was very humble in his wins, but he was still number one qualifier, putting wins together, putting a championship out there. But he never was very outspoken or boisterous about it. And some people are just that way.
But I think the difference with Mike had been racing, I believe, since 96 in pro stock. And women who had followed the sport had seen Mike go through the ups, the downs, the struggles. No one at any given time before 2009 said Mike Edwards is going to be the pro stock champion, especially with the Summit boys were doing at that time with Greg Anderson, Jason Lyon, whatever the case may be, even Jay Coughlin around that time. No one ever, you figured Mike was a player, semifinal on a good weekend, maybe lose to one of the top guys in the finals. So I think it was great to see Mike climb to the top after all those years and start beating those guys consistently to where, he was still the same Mike Edwards, but because we gotten to know him and to see him just grow out of nowhere, it's almost like you couldn't help but to root for the guy.
Right.
I think it just comes off a little different. Whereas Gage, granted, he was relatively an unknown bike before he joined Vance and Hines. It's like people didn't really know who he was, and I doubt if anyone cared because he wasn't on tour like that. So some people look at it as you just got gifted on the best bike on the property, of course. I mean, no one watched you go through a struggle, so to speak. We didn't watch him fail to qualify for a bunch of events over 10 years or have a bunch of early round losses to that effect. So I think it hit a little bit different with Mike than it does with Gage from a fan's point of view.
Okay, well, you could also look at it and say, yes, Gary Salzi came from the alcohol dragster and funny car ranks, but he jumped right into Top Fuel and had instant success and was another one who, put back them championships without, just jumped right into the top car of the sport and won those championships in a row. And that's the thing with Gage is he's doing all this from the start of his career. I mean, the numbers that he's putting together are Hall of Fame numbers, and he is in his second full season of competition in pro stock motorcycle. Nobody in any class, in any of the eras of NHRA, have started a career the way that Gage has. Correct.
Which even furthers my point. So no one has ever seen him rise to where he's become. It's almost like you were given the keys to a Ferrari, you just don't wreck it at the start of your career. Now, in the Celsi situation, I think is slightly different because of who he was taking over for and the tragic death of Blaine Johnson. You couldn't help but to root for who. It didn't have to be Gary Celsi. It could have been me or you driving that car. Fans are going to root for you back then just because of the nature of which Blaine crashed, him leading the points. People felt like he was going to win the championship that year. Different scenario, I believe.
100%. I'm just saying, as far as a rookie season or somebody coming out of nowhere and just and putting down these numbers, Larry Dixon, these guys, they get into these cars and you're in a professional category, professional class. And it's not to say that, it's not like Gage hasn't come from a family of racers or that Gage hasn't been out there racing motorcycles for a while. He just hasn't done it in the NHRA level of competition.
Correct.
And yes,
Correct.
To go out there with the team that they did to get their start and to be recognized by Vance and Hines. Maybe he's just one of those guys that's just good at what he does because he's out there cutting lights and he's not letting the pressure get to him yet. So, yeah, I mean, I hope him and Matt, go out there and maybe start burning each other down. Maybe start looking over at each other, Matt and the Vance and Hines team, Matt and Andrew had no problem going out there. Matt and Eddie had no problem going out there and getting after it with each other. So, rookie or not, and I think when the streak does end, and obviously everything comes to an end, whoever it is that turns on the win line in the other lane will definitely go down in the record books. I just hope that they earn it and it's not off of a red light from Gage.
Yeah, and to your credit, and to your point of hoping that they burn each other down or Gage look is over, Gage doesn't come off as a guy who's going to play that game with Matt. He just doesn't come off as that guy who's going to play that game. He might surprise us. He seems like he's going to come up there, just do his job, cut a light, and go. And that may be the case, and that's who he is. But to your point, yeah, everything comes to an end, and when it comes to an end this weekend in Richmond, it'll be a heck of a story to tell, and it'll be credit to the Matt Smith Racing team for their win at Richmond this coming weekend. And that's all I have to say about that. Well,
and Gage is very similar, I think, in his mannerisms, his characteristics, and the way his career has kind of taken off to Lee Shepard. Lee Shepard,
yeah.
When he came out, they struggled a little bit, so he wasn't like an instant success. But for the years that he did have in competition in pro stock, for the amount of national events that he won, the amount of divisional events that he won, and the amount of championships that he won compared to the years that he competed in the category, his winning percentage is going to be near the top pretty much all time, no matter what goes on in the future. So I think that he was another one. He didn't go out there and play the game. He worked on the stuff. He went out there, he ran his race. They took another trophy and went on with it. And, there wasn't really – I think that the Gage and Matt rivalry could be similar to what the Bob Glidden and Lee Shepard rivalry was. They weren't jabbing back and forth. They weren't poking fun. They weren't talking a lot of trash in the media. They had a lot of respect for each other, and they just went out there, and when they competed, it was a battle. And I think that might be, what we're seeing here with Gage and Matt. Although Matt is a lot more outspoken with things, so that may or may not be the case.
He goes on a few website sites and says what speaks his mind.
It has that possibility.
No, you're right. Well, Dave, you're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. Yes, I'm not going to hold you. It's got to be pretty late where you're at.
Almost 9 o'clock.
Yeah, see, once again, man, it's a pleasure doing this with you. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
You bet.
We'll get together. Tune in, folks, next week. When's Richmond? This weekend?
2 weeks.
Next weekend. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We'll have a Richmond show for you.
Richmond next weekend, and we'll be here, and we're going to see if the prediction comes true and the streak is over via Matt Smith, or we're going to be talking about Gage Herrera holding up the record books forever.
Matt Smith will win Richmond. Dave, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate the time. To everybody who's watched, thank you. Thank you, Darren, for tuning in. Catch you guys next time.